Hello, good evening, and welcome to a new episode of Arguably the Reading Quest. I am Nishant. So, before we start, just an honest appeal, please subscribe the channel and please watch till the end. So, it so appeared to me that, let's explore how the term philosophy has been described and has been exposited by various philosophers, especially those philosophers who have written, lengthy tomes on the history of philosophy. So the past 3-4 days I've been, exploring what is philosophy, this particular term, and I thought of doing a video on this. Although I've done many videos on philosophy, but this is particularly on this term, what is philosophy, and that's from the perspective of the Western philosophy. So is it that what Plato calls that dear delight? Or he and his disciple Aristotle both assert that philosophy begins in wonder? Or Kant says that the starry heaven above me and the moral laws within me are the only two questions that concerns me? Or what Schopenhauer says that to interpret the nature of reality, or what Nietzsche believed to find a new man, a new humanity, a superman, or what Heidegger says it is the unhiddenness of being, or what Russell says that it is something that teaches us how to live without certainty and yet without being paralyzed by hesitation. Or what Karl Jaspers says that the Greek word for philosopher, philosophos, connotes a distinction from sophos. It signifies the lover of wisdom, knowledge, as distinguished from him who considers himself wise in the possession of knowledge. This meaning of the word still endures. The essence of philosophy is not the possession of the truth, but the search for truth. Please mind it. It is not the possession of the truth, but the search for truth. Philosophy means to be on the way. Its questions are more essential than its answers, and every answer becomes a new question. Or it is what Anthony Kenny and, the recent analytical philosophy suggests, that philosophy is linguistic. And then Anthony Kenny says that it may mean at least 6 different things. You can see at my computer screen here. The first thing is that the study of language is a useful philosophical tool. It is the only philosophical tool. Language is the only subject matter of philosophy. Necessary truths are established by linguistic convention. Man is fundamentally a language-using animal. Everyday language has a status of privilege over technical and formal systems. And all these 6 propositions are independent of each other. First has been accepted in practice by every philosopher since Plato, which means the study of language as a useful philosophical tool is a proposition that has been, fully and fairly accepted by every philosopher since Plato. Concerning the other 5, philosophers have been divided, including the philosophers within the analytical tradition. And then Anthony Kenny says that in my opinion, 1 and 5 are true and other 4 are false. But I do not argue for this sweeping generalization anywhere in the present book, says Anthony Kenny from his book, The Metaphysics of Mind. Now, to start with, how Will Durant explores what does philosophy mean, or what can we expect from philosophy, from his magnum opus, The Story of Philosophy. And then once after, reading from this, I'll also summarize with the help of some quotes. So Will Durant says that there is a pleasure in philosophy and a lure even in the mirages of metaphysics, which every student feels until the coarse necessities of physical existence drags him from the height of thought into the mart of economic strife and gain. Most of us have known some golden days in the June of life when philosophy was in fact what Plato calls it, that dear delight. When the love of a modestly elusive truth seemed more glorious, incomparably more glorious, than the lust for the ways of flesh and the dross of world. And there is always some wistful remnant in us of that early wooing of wisdom. Life has a meaning, says Robert Browning, and to find its meaning is my meat and drink. And you see, this is, written much before the popular existential philosophy came to the fore. So much of our lives is meaningless, a self-cancelling vacillation and futility. We strive with the chaos about us and within. But we would also believe all the while that there is something vital and significant in us. Could we but decipher our own soul? We want to understand life means for us constantly to transform into light and flame all that we are or all that we meet with. We are like Mithya in the Brothers Karamazov, right? Will Durant. One of those who don't want millions but the answer to their questions. We want to seize the value and perspective of passing things. And so, to pull ourselves up out of the maelstrom of daily circumstances. We want to know that the little things are little and the big things are big. Before it is too late, we want to see things now as they will seem forever in the light of eternity. This is what philosophy is. We want to learn to laugh in the face of the inevitable, to smile even at the looming of death. We want to be a complete whole, to coordinate our energies by criticizing and harmonizing our desires. To be a philosopher, says Thoreau, is not merely to have subtle thoughts, nor even to found a school, but so to love wisdom as to live, according to its dictates, a life full of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust. You see, what a beautiful exposition on philosophy by Will Durant. When I say he writes so poetically, that's an enduring testimony. We may be sure that if we can but find wisdom, all things else will be added unto us. Seek ye the first good things of mind, Bacon admonishes us, and the rest will either be supplied or its losses will not be felt. And then Will Durant finally says that truth will not make us rich, but it will make us free. You see what a profound thought it is. But is philosophy stagnant? Asks Will Durant. Science seems always to advance, while philosophy seems always to lose grounds. Yet, this is only because philosophy accepts the hard and hazardous task of dealing with problems, not yet open to the methods of science. Problems like good and evil, beauty and ugliness, order and freedom, life and death. So soon as a field of inquiry yields knowledge susceptible of exact formulation, it is called science. Every science begins as philosophy and ends as art. It arises in hypothesis and flows into achievement. Philosophy is a hypothetical interpretation of the unknown, as in the metaphysics, or of the inexactly known, as in ethics or political philosophy. It is the front trench in the seas of truth. Science is a captured territory, and behind it are those secure reasons in which knowledge and art build our imperfect and marvelous world. Philosophy seems to stand still, perplexed, but only because she leaves the fruit of victory to her daughters, the sciences, and herself pass on divinely discontent to the uncertain and unexplored. So you see the elusive nature of philosophy, yet its quintessential fundamental importance is being expounded upon by Will Durant so beautifully. Shall we be more technical, says Will Durant. Science is analytical description, whereas philosophy is synthetic interpretation. Science wishes to resolve the whole into part, the organism into organs, the obscure into the known. It does not inquire into the value and ideal possibility of things, nor into their total and final significance. It is content to show their present actualities and operation. It narrows its gaze resolutely to the nature and process of things as they are. The scientist is as impartial as nature in Turgenev's poem. He is as interested in a leg of a flea as in the creative throes of a genius. But the philosopher is not content to describe the fact. He wishes to ascertain its relation to experience in general, and thereby to get at its meaning and its worth. I will expose it more on fact a little later in this video. Please watch till the end. He combines things in interpretive synthesis. He tries to put together better than before that great universe watch which the inquisitive scientist has analytically taken apart. Science tells us how to heal and how to kill. It reduces the death rate in retail and then kills us wholesale in war. Only wisdom, desire, coordinated in the light of all experience, can tell us when to heal and when to kill. Science without philosophy, fact without perspective and valuation, cannot save us from havoc and despair. Science gives us knowledge, but only philosophy gives us wisdom. So let us listen to these men, the great philosophers Durant is referring to, ready to forgive them in their passing errors and eager to learn the lesson which they are so eager to teach. "Do you then be reasonable?" said old Socrates to Crito, "and do not mind whether the teachers of philosophy are good or bad, but think only of philosophy herself. Try to examine her well and truly, and if she be evil, seek to turn away all men from her. But if she be what I believe she is, then follow her, serve her, and be of a good cheer." This is how, the introduction to the story of philosophy by Durant starts. And no wonder Durant writes, and I sum up. You can see the quote at my computer screen. "A nation is born stoic and die Epicurean. At its cradle, to repeat a thoughtful adage, religion stands and philosophy accompanies it to the grave. In the beginning of all cultures, a strong religious faith conceals and softens the nature of things and gives men courage to bear pain and hardship patiently. At every step, the gods are with them and will not let them perish until they do. Even then, a firm faith will explain that it was the sins of the people that turned their God to an avenging wrath. Evil does not destroy faith, but strengthens it. If victory comes, if war is forgotten in security and peace, then wealth grows. The life of the body gives away in the dominant classes to the life of the senses and the mind. Toil and suffering are replaced by pleasure and ease. Science weakens faith, even while thought and comfort weaken virility and fortitude. At last, men begin to doubt the gods. They mourn the tragedy of knowledge and seek refuge in every passing delight. Achilles is the beginning, Epicurus is the end. After David comes Job, after Job comes Ecclesiastes. This is what Durant wrote in Our Oriental Heritage. And then Durant writes, "At last are the few whose delight is in meditation and understanding. At last are the few whose delight is in meditation and understanding, who yearn not for goods nor for victory, but for knowledge, who leave both market and battlefield to lose themselves in the quiet clarity of secluded thought. Those will is a light rather than a fire, whose heaven is not power but truth. These are the men of wisdom, who stand aside unused by the world." And then Durant says, "The only revolution is the enlightenment of mind and the improvement of character. The only real emancipation is individual, and the only real revolutionists are philosophers and saints," write Durant in the Lessons of History. And then to sum it up, what philosophy is, Durant writes in The Pleasures of Philosophy, "If there is any intelligence guiding this universe, philosophy wishes to know and understand it and reverently walk with it. If there is none, philosophy wishes to know that also and face it without fear. If the stars are but transient coagulations of haphazard nebula, if life is a colloidal accident, impersonally permanent and individually fleeting, if man is only a compound of chemicals, destined to disintegrate and utterly disappear, if the creative ecstasy of art and the gentle wisdom of the sage and the willing martyrdom of saints are but bright incidents in the protoplasmic, pullulations of the earth, and death is the answer to every problem and the destiny of every soul, then philosophy will face that too. and try to find within that narrowed circle some significance and novelty for man. This is how, Will Durant sums up what philosophy is. Let me explore, what philosophy is as explored by Bertrand Russell in his History of Western Philosophy. So Russell writes in the introduction to the History of Western Philosophy that philosophy is a word which has been used in many ways, some wider, some narrower. I propose to use it in a very wide sense, which I will now try to explain. Philosophy, as I shall understand the word, is something intermediate between theology and science. Like theology, it consists of speculations on matter as to which definite knowledge has so far been unascertainable. But like science, it appeals to human reason than to authority, whether that of tradition or that of revelation. All definite knowledge belongs to science. All dogma as to what surpasses definite knowledge belongs to theology. But between theology and science, there is a no man's land exposed from both sides, and this no man's land is philosophy. Almost all the questions of most interest to speculative mind are such as science cannot answer, and the confident answers of theologians no longer seem convincing as they did in former centuries. For example, what are the questions that science cannot answer, but all the speculative minds are, bent on answering such questions? Is the world divided into mind and matter? If so, what is mind and what is matter? Has the universe any unity of purpose? Is it evolving towards some goal? Are there really laws of nature, or do we believe in them only because of our innate love for order? Is man what he seems to be to the astronomer? A tiny lump of impure carbon and water impotently crawling on a small, unimportant planet? Or is he what he appears to Hamlet? Is he perhaps both at once? Is there a way of living that is nobler and another way that is base? Or are all ways of living merely futile? Remember the profound question that Socrates asked, that only an examined life is worth living, and unexamined life is not worth living. If there is a way of living that is novel, in what does it consist and how shall we achieve it? To such question, no answer can be found in the laboratory. Theologies have professed to give answers, all too definite, and because they are too definite, their definiteness causes modern mind to view them with suspicion. And the studying of these questions, if not answering of them, is the business of philosophy. Why then, you may ask, Russell tells us, to waste time on such insoluble problem? To this one may answer as a historian or an individual facing the terror of cosmic loneliness. The answer to the historian, Bertrand Russell says, insofar as he is capable of giving it, will appear in the course of this work. Ever since men become capable of free speculation, their actions in innumerable important aspects have depended upon their theories as to the world and the human life, as to what is good and what is evil. And this is true in the present day as at any formal time. Now, to understand an age or a nation, we must ourselves be in some degree philosophers. So there is a reciprocal causation here. Reciprocal causation means, A is causing B, but B again influencing A. The circumstances of men's life do much to determine their philosophy. But conversely, their philosophy also does much to determine their circumstances. But there is also, however, a more personal answer. And the personal answer here is that science tells us what we can know, but what we can know is very little. And if we forget how much we cannot know, we become insensitive to many things of greater importance. Remember, this is what philosophy tells us, how much we do not know. Science only tells us what we know, and what we know is very little. And of course, it is subject to change in scientific paradigm. Theology, on the other hand, induces a dogmatic belief that we have knowledge where in fact we have ignorance. And by doing so, it generates a kind of impertinent insolence towards the universe. Now, Here comes the profound, lines of wisdom by Bertrand Russell. Uncertainty in the presence of vivid hopes and fears is painful, but must be endured if we wish to live without the support of comforting fairy tales. No wonder Bertrand Russell says that there is something feeble and little contemptible about a man who cannot face the perils of life without the help of a comfortable myth. To teach how to live without certainty and yet without being paralyzed by hesitation is perhaps the chief thing that philosophy in our age can still do for those who study it, says Russell. Russell says, finally, that the search for something permanent is one of the deepest instincts leading men to philosophy. And philosophy, if it cannot answer so many questions as we wish could, has at least the power of asking questions, which increases the interest of the world and show the strangeness and wonder lying below the surface, even in the commonest things of daily life. Philosophy for Plato is a kind of vision, the vision of truth. Everyone who has done any kind of creative work has experienced in greater or lesser degree the state of mind in which, after a long labor, truth and beauty appears, or seem to appear in a sudden glory. It may be only about some small matter, or it may be about the universe. You see, even a logical philosopher, a mathematician like Bertrand Russell is talking of epiphany. I think most of the best creative work in art, in science, in literature, and in philosophy has been the result of such a moment. And then why is philosophy important is expounded by Russell in his book, The Problems of Philosophy, a difficult book actually. A man who has no tincture of philosophy goes through life imprisoned in the prejudices derived from common sense, from the habitual beliefs of his age or his nation, and from convictions which have grown up in his mind without the cooperation or consent of his deliberate reason. This is what philosophy is, and that is, what makes men, what forces men to search, to do philosophy, is the search for something permanent, says Bertrand Russell. Now, another very iconic philosopher of past century, a German philosopher and a psychiatrist, Karl Jaspers, pioneer in existentialism. Let's see what Karl Jaspers has to say on philosophy from his book, An Introduction to Philosophy, Way to Wisdom, published at Yale University Press. So Karl Jaspers says that philosophical thought must always spring from free creation. Every man must accomplish it for himself. A marvel indication of man's innate disposition to philosophy is to be found in questions asked by children. And if someone could catalog, such questions asked by children, all those penetrate to the very depth of philosophy. For example, a child cries in wonderment, "I keep trying to think that I am somebody else, but I am always myself." Questioningly, he stands before this ultimate reality. Another boy hears the story of creation. In the beginning, God made the heaven and the earth, and immediately asks, what was before the beginning? The child has sensed that there is no end to questioning, and that there is no stopping place for the mind, that no conclusive answer is possible. A little girl out walking in the woods, asks with her father, listen to his stories about the elves that dance in the clearing at night, says, but there are no elves. Her father shifts over to realities, describes the motion of sun, discusses the question of whether it is the sun or the earth that revolves, and explains the reason for supposing that earth is round and rotates on its own. Oh, that isn't so, says the little girl, and stamps her foot. The earth stands still, I only believe what I see. Then, you don't believe in God? You can't see him either. The little girl is puzzled this time for a moment, but then says with great assurance, if there weren't any God, we wouldn't be here at all. And she understood that there's a difference between questions bearing on particular objects in the world and those bearing on our existence as a whole. So anyone who chooses to collect these small stories might compile a rich store of children's philosophy. The child still reacts, spontaneously to the spontaneity of life. The child feels and sees and inquires into things which soon disappear from his vision. I recall a statement by somewhere I read when D.H. Lawrence was walking with a girl child in a garden, and the child asks why the trees are green, why the leaves are green. And D.H. Lawrence, failed to answer that. And he says, the leaves are green because the leaves are green. There's no answer to such questions. Third, spontaneous philosophy is found not only in children but also in insane, the lunatic, the madman. Sometimes, rarely, the wheels of universal occlusion seem to part and penetrating truths are manifested. The beginning of certain mental disorder is often distinguished by shattering metaphysical revelations, though they are usually formulated in terms that cannot achieve significance. Exceptions are such cases as the life of Hölderlin and Van Gogh. So Hölderlin and Van Gogh. But anyone witnessing these revelations cannot help feeling that the mists in which we ordinarily live our lives have been torn asunder. And many sane people have experienced strangely revealing insights which will vanish with full wakefulness, leaving behind them only the impressions that can never be recaptured. There's a profound meaning in saying that children and fools tell the truth. But the creative originality to which we owe great philosophical ideas is not to be sought here but amongst those great minds. And in all history there have been only a few of them who preserve their candor and independence. And then the third point, since man cannot avoid philosophy, it is always present. In the proverbs handed down by the tradition, in particular philosophical phrases in dominant convictions, such as are embodied in the idiom of emancipated in political opinions, but most of all, since the very beginnings of history in myths, there is no escape from philosophy. The question is only whether a philosophy is conscious or not, whether it is good or bad, muddled or clear. Anyone who rejects philosophy is himself unconsciously practicing philosophy. Karl Jaspers. And then I sum up with this quote, you can see it at my computer screen, that the Greek word for philosopher, philosophos, connotes a distinction from sophos. It signifies the lover of wisdom, knowledge, as distinguished from him who considers himself wise in possession of knowledge. This meaning of the word still endures. The essence of philosophy is not the possession of the truth, but the search for truth. Philosophy means to be on the way. Its questions are more essential than its answers, and every answer becomes a new question, says Karl Jaspers. But this remains my all-time favorite. What Karl Jaspers wrote in World Review magazine in the year 1950, in the March of year 1950, that to philosophize is to learn how to die. Philosophizing is a soaring up to the Godhead, the knowledge of being as being, says Karl Jaspers. At last, but not the least, something very, technical, very academic about what philosophy is, or what we can expect from philosophy. From an introduction to philosophical analysis by John Hospers, published at Routledge. So you see, it is a beautiful, beautiful, exposition on the word philosophy. So what philosophy is, you see, at least all of us will agree that if the question can be answered empirically by the use of senses, by seeing, by hearing, by touching or other senses, then it is essentially not a philosophical question. I hope all of us agree at this point at least. So let's explore what is not a philosophical question, and then we will come to what is a philosophical question. So, statements of ordinary perception. There are 3 chairs in the room. Most of the Earth's surface is covered with water are not philosophical questions, right? Questions that science can answer are not philosophical questions. Physics, astronomy, geology, chemistry, biology, and psychology are all empirical sciences. And the discoveries are made through observations and experimentation that involve numerous aid for senses. So if an experiment can settle such questions, it is a scientific question, please mind it, and it is not a philosophical question, right? What Russell says, there's a no man's land. Now, question of what has happened in the past is also not a philosophical question. When did Abraham Lincoln die? Or who lived on earth 1,000,000 years ago? Are all historical questions, right? Questions in arithmetic and algebra and other branches of mathematics are also not philosophical questions. 2 raised to the power 2. Or how much is 500 plus 600? Is a question in arithmetic. Are there bees in these hive? Is an empirical question to be settled by observation and not by adding, subtracting, and so on. Mathematical questions require calculation, not observation. But then what is left for philosophy to consider? Now, different answer to this question can be suggested. They all take us into much the same area of thought, although the answer themselves are not the same. So here are the main ones. I will just describe the 3 major ones. First of all, philosophy is the study of reality. But what kind of study of reality? I mean, all the questions that I have previously asked were all about the study of the nature of reality. But it is not that aspect of reality that is already covered by various sciences. Please understand. Whatever questions are not empirical and not mathematical are left over for philosophy to tackle. Not everyone agrees that there are such leftover questions. But whether this is so, we have yet to consider. The question with which we begin at least seemed to be such a good question, that why certain things have happened. Philosophy is the study of justification. It is concerned how we justify the claims we make. For example, how do you know that there's a physical world? Are we all not dreaming that there is a God beyond the stars? That goodness and beauty really exist, that the mind is separate from the body, that time is infinite? All these are the study of justification. So first, philosophy is the study of reality, that nature of reality which is not answered by empirical sciences. Then we have the study of justification. And then at last, philosophy is the analysis of various concepts that are central to our thought. For example, we speak of causes every day, but what is a cause? We use numbers, but what is a number? We speak of justice, but what is justice? We describe things as beautiful, but what is beauty? We speak of before and after in time, but what is time? We describe things as real, but what is reality? These are the questions that philosophy, aims to answer. So guys, I hope you have enjoyed the video. I have given you in a nutshell, okay, what is philosophy? An introduction to the question, just what is philosophy and how various philosophers have attempted to answer the question. I hope you have enjoyed the video. If you have still not liked, shared and subscribed my YouTube channel, arguably the Reading Quest, please do that. Please press the bell icon. Happy reading, guys.